Alrighty, I'm going to start. So my name's Tamara. I'm with SoStocked, obviously. As you probably gathered, the entire purpose of SoStocked is to take the pain out of inventory management. So today I'm just going to walk you through how everything works, all our different features. If you have any questions, usually I'd say to put them in the Zoom chat box, but unfortunately it's not working today. So instead, if you don't mind just leaving any questions till the end, I'll happily unmute everyone and you can ask away. So yeah, I'll leave time at the end for Q&A. If you want to just jot it down to remind yourselves as I go through, then that's cool too. All right, so the first thing you do when you sign up to your SoStocked account is you're going to basically connect it up to your Sell Essential account, right? So it's just like any other Sell Essential app or software app that you've been using. It's going to pull all the data it needs to from your Amazon account. That just happens automatically. So all of your products, anything it can really. So I'll show exactly what in a bit, but this here is just our settings page. Aside from that initial API pull that it does from Sell Essential into SoStocked, you also have the option to do a bulk export import. So if you want to add any additional data like your cost of goods, shipping costs, your minimum order quantities, or how many units per case or carton, little details like that are useful in the software, that's why you would do it. So you just download a CSV or Excel spreadsheet, update it with that data. You can migrate it, copy paste whatever you already have, feed it into the system, and it'll automatically populate. So that's pretty simple in terms of setup. First page we have here is the vendors page. So vendors in SoStocked is referring to any 3PL in general. So that would include your suppliers, your warehouses, prep centers, etc. So here's where you're going to add all of your vendor information. So like, for example, you go + vendor and you could select which one it is: supplier, warehouse, prep center, freight forwarder, whichever. If it acts as both, you can select both and it'll mean in the software you can use both. For the most part, when you do that initial API pull, it actually does find from previous shipments a lot of your suppliers or warehouses in Amazon. So sometimes you don't need to do too much. And then you can see here that you have all your products and you would just assign particular products to each warehouse or supplier. So it knows where to either store, send, or buy from. That is your vendors page. And then we have this tab up here for lead times. So what are your lead times? Lead times are basically the brain or the command center of your entire SoStocked account. So this is what's going to dictate your entire process with inventory. It's completely tailor-made. So whatever your business needs are, or whatever business model you have, could be for each product or each supply. It just depends on your setup really. But you're going to build out some lead times for that. And this is what automates everything. So I'll show you what this looks like. I'll take this one, for example. It's the default lead time. So you can see here that it's a 38-day lead time. It has only a day of production, 25 ocean freight, and then 10 days air freight, and then 2 days to check in at the warehouse. And then you can see we've selected which warehouse out of the list of available ones. And then you can even assign it to a particular supplier. So if this is the main lead time for these suppliers, in other words, the primary one that it's going to choose, you can easily just do that. Saves you a lot of time instead of having to add it to each product, right? So the rule of thumb, if I go back here actually, is that wherever the lead time ends is where the inventory gets added. So if it's expecting it on the forecast to arrive to the warehouse, just say you buy a large quantity and you send in smaller quantities from the warehouse to Amazon, you'd want to break it up. Whereas if you send things directly to Amazon, you'd have something more like this where it goes all the way ending at FBA check-in. So those are your lead times. Next, we have this inventory page up here. Click on the tab, opens up, and looks like this. So as I was saying earlier, it does that initial API pull and it'll pull in all of your data from Amazon into SoStocked. It's going to be reflected here like this. If I scroll across, you'll see there are tons and tons of columns of data on this inventory page. These columns that are reflected here are the same as what you'll see in this drop down here called columns. So if I go down the list, you'll see more. You can toggle them on and off. So just say you don't really use a SKU or FN SKU, you can turn them off. You can also drag and drop them. It's very customizable. Yeah. Then you have filters. So right now this default is that the status is active. So any inactive products would be in there, right? But you can add additional filters. So if you wanted to filter out a particular product name or by tag, by SKU, you can do that as well. These boxes up here, these are called dashboards. So, or views if you like. Here's one that I made earlier. Some of these come preset, some of them are built. So this one I built just by adding a filter onto it. So this one has days of supply in Amazon that are greater than or equal to 90 days. So just say I normally send in just a month's supply to Amazon, and I consider something that has 90 days inventory to be overstocked. At any given time with this filter, any products that fall into that category of having more than 90 days or 90 days worth of inventory are going to fall into this little dashboard. And I can also export this to an Excel spreadsheet. In fact, you can pretty much export almost any page in SoStocked to an Excel spreadsheet just by clicking that little cloud there. You can also group, if I go back to the default page, you can group by supplier, by warehouse, by brand. You can also tag products. So aside from like by supplier or by brand, if you wanted to have some sort of system or way to filter out information or save settings to a particular group of products without any other identifier, you can just create a tag. So you could go assign tag, add new, and select the tag. So just say you had a bunch of Christmas products, for example. They only sell at Christmas or Halloween, something seasonal, and you wanted to apply some settings or be able to separate them out, just tag them. It's like any other tagging system. Another dashboard we have is slow sellers. So this one I just put adjusted velocity less than 0.4. So all this means is that it's anything that's selling less than 0.4 units on average per day would fall into this dashboard. And I can also export to an Excel spreadsheet, give it to a VA or whoever I wanted to go and do something about that. The other thing you can do from here is you can also update your warehouse inventory. So if you have a large account, you're going to want to use that bulk spreadsheet I showed you in the beginning to really add in your warehouse inventory levels, but you can also do it from here. So you just plug in whatever the quantity is, hit submit, and that'll update and populate into SoStocked right away. Yeah, so that's about it for this inventory page. And then here's where all the good stuff happens on the forecast page. So here we have this default setting as group by supplier. So you can also group it by warehouse, by brand, marketplace, or region as well. You'll notice that there's a bunch of green buttons. So these are your order suggestions. Basically, if you wanted to create a purchase order, which you can do directly from SoStocked, you're going to hit these. These would create individual ones, but if you want to create the order suggestion for every single order or product, you would just hit order all and it would generate a purchase order with all of them together. The blue are your transfer suggestions. They create work orders. So basically that's working out how much inventory you need to send in from your third-party warehouse into Amazon. And so they have their own separate page where you can do transfers. If I click here, you'll see that it'll be grouped by warehouse, and each warehouse itself will have its own transfer all button. Alrighty. So I know there's a lot of data on this page. I'll walk you through it. Let's start with velocity. So there's actually 3 different ways you can calculate your product's velocity in SoStocked. Velocity just means your average number of daily sales. So that's how many you're selling per day on average. And this average can be based over a long period or short period. I'll show you what that looks like. If I click on here, it'll open up the 3 ways of calculating the velocity. So this first one here is our default setting. It basically breaks down the last 6 months into these time increments, and it takes these averages of units sold per day across each of these time periods, and then it averages that out. So essentially it's like an average on an average. For example, in the last 2 days, this sold about 5 units on average per day. In the last 60 days, this would have sold on average 1.43 on average per day throughout the entire last 60 days from the present. So once it has all of these figures pulled in from Amazon, and it does do an API pull every day, twice a day, but once it has that pulled in, it then averages them out. So it adds them together, which equates to 13.9, and then it divides it by 7, given there are 7 boxes. Just say this happened to hit into my Q4. I had just launched it. I don't want to include it right now. It might be bringing down the average, given I'm selling about 5 on average per day. I can just unselect these, and it'll just divide it by these 5 instead. And that's how you get your velocity. That's the default setting. And then we have manual velocity. So it's pretty straightforward and simple. It's just how many units per day you predict or expect you're going to sell. So when would you use this? Mostly when you're just launching a product or when you're maybe relaunching a product. So obviously it has no sales history. This will be redundant. So instead you just plug in however many you think you're going to sell at launch. And you can also use this to prompt you how many units to send into Amazon from your warehouse if you've already purchased your inventory. And then you have last year's sales. So this is quite self-explanatory. It's based off last year's sales. It'll pull the daily sales data from your Sell Essential over the previous 365 days, and it'll essentially mirror them day by day. So it's predicting that you're going to sell whatever you sold last year today. This isn't the greatest example. It hasn't really got any sales. Might pop into another product. See if this one was. Nope. Unlucky. Okay. Anyways, we have to play pretend. So let's just say this said 12, it'll show up as 12. If you added, say, some growth on, then obviously the growth would be reflected here. And then if it said 10, it'll show 10 and 8 and 8, right? But just say we have these 8 units here, and then it had an asterisk there. All that would mean would be that that was an actual stock out day, and it didn't actually sell those 8 units that it would be saying. So SoStocked is actually clever enough that it can actually work out what you would have sold had you not stocked out. The way that it does that is it takes the surrounding sales data. It'll take the 30 days before and after, and it'll just average it out. Here's a better example. So yeah, just say it had that asterisk there saying it was a stock out day. It's basically just averaging out the 30 days before and after. The reason I say that is because this works really well unless you have a lot of stock out periods, too many, too frequently, or for an extended time period. So then obviously that would be a little too watered down and not able to be used. You can also see this in weekly view, in monthly, go way to see a seasonality. And almost every setting on this forecast page can be saved to just this product alone, to all products, to all filter results, by supplier, by brand, marketplace, or by tag. Alrighty. So that's your velocity. And then we have this column here, which is days until stock out. So essentially that's just how many days worth of inventory you have on hand, right? So it takes how many you're selling on average per day, divides it by what you actually have available at Amazon. You might notice like this product here, it has 2 different numbers. That's a lot of stuff. But this smaller number is basically what's actually available at Amazon, whereas the larger number is what's available at Amazon as well as what's inbound. Alrighty, so we've got the product name, you've got your ASIN, your SKU, and then the marketplaces that it's forecasting for. Usually it'll just be one. I guess this was a tailor-made one. But if we open this up, first thing you'll see is here, this little graph. So it's weekly sales graph. You can do monthly, daily as well, and it'll show you your actual sales for that week or month or day. So last week they sold 14 units, right? Week before 11. And then it'll also show you the future predicted velocity and forecast in the graph as well. Then we have these calculation variables. So this is the main place where you put in all of your settings. Basically, you're telling SoStocked how much you want to order, when, why, things you want to include, exclude. You're giving it all of the parameters in these 3 boxes, these calculation variables. So you've got 1, 2, and 3. So first up, we have the order schedule. I'm going to take you through them all. So this is just how frequently you want to place your order with your supplier, right? So you can choose every month, every 2 weeks, a custom number of days, totally up to you. And you can select the start date. So if you wanted to order on the 26th of every month, or let's just say a Tuesday, every Tuesday, you can go ahead and do that. And then we have this option as needed. As needed, I really like. It's very flexible. It's regardless of date. So it's just going to recalculate, reverse engineer whatever data it pulls in and work out whatever you need to do whenever you need to do it. So it's very flexible. And then we have this box here. So you have 2 options here. We generally just call this box our buffer stock. So you can do units or you can do days. Obviously, days is a lot more dynamic. It's going to change based on your velocity. So for example, if I have 7, what could be 7 days worth of inventory in Q1 could be totally different in Q4, for example. So just say I put in a 30-day minimum and a 60-day max one. Let's go 90. So 90 would basically be me telling it to top up to 90 days. So never have more than 90 days worth of inventory. It's not necessarily going to send in a full 90 days each time because I've also put in this extra parameter of 30 days buffer. So it's kind of like, well, the general concept here is that whatever you put in here as the minimum buffer stock will sort of act as a false zero. Kind of like your car's fuel gauge, rather than letting you run out of gas be stranded on the side of the road. It's going to tell you to top up sooner, right? So if I always want to leave and never go below 30 days worth of inventory, I put 30. And so really this means that between the 90 and the 30, I'm actually going to be sending in 60 days worth of inventory every 2 months or every 60 days, right? So basically it's going to top up this 90, send in 60 days worth, have it fully available at Amazon before I start using my last 30 days worth of inventory. So that's a great way that we use the software and the settings to help you from never having to stock out. Same goes for the warehouse. It's not really any different. You just put in however much you want to order to the warehouse if you're using one, and the minimum buffer stock. And again, you can save this to just this product, to all filtered results by supplier, brand, marketplace, or by tag. That's the order schedule. That would be your purchasing and buying. Transfer schedule is simply transferring inventory from your third-party warehouse if you're using one, and the frequency of that. Whatever you set on the last box that we looked at would remain here, so that wouldn't be any different. You'd only really be tweaking this. So same thing here. You can do as needed every week, and you can pick a day of the week if you like. Then you have your minimum order quantity. So if you have one, you would plug it in there. If you have a minimum transfer quantity, same thing, plug it in. With the MOQs and MTQs, it's basically you telling SoStocked, hey, never tell me to order less than this certain amount. You can also utilize it doesn't have to be your supplier's MOQ. You can also utilize it in the case of just say, you'll get the best discount and you never really don't go for that discount at a certain quantity. You can also use it to say, hey, never tell me to order less than this. Then you've got your packaging info. So if you put in how many units per case or carton, it'll basically round up all of your order and transfer suggestions to the nearest full case or carton. And if you only really care about, for example, having your orders to the nearest full case or carton, you can have that turned on, and you can also turn off your transfers. If you plug in your cartons per pallet, pallets per container, it'll also do the math for you on the purchase orders with regards to that. And then you have your default lead time. So as I showed you early on, you just plug in whichever lead time applies, and it's going to use this when it comes to the forecast and reverse engineering everything, making sure it knows when you should order so that it arrives in time. Then we have express lead time. So this is pretty cool. It's really clever. Basically, if it's showing that you're going to suddenly run out of stock or have a stock out, and you've got a setting in here of like an express lead time, so anything that would be faster, maybe I'll get rid of that. Let's just say it goes 10 days air freight. So that's only 13 days. And I plug that in there. Basically, it'll work out how much you need to send in terms of inventory express. So it'll try to be as economical as it can, just to save you and cover you for those stock out days. And then you have here transfer time. So this is just how long it takes for your inventory to get from your third-party warehouse into Amazon. So you would plug that in there, and it uses it on this inventory timeline, which I'll show you in a minute. Then we have trends. So with this tool, you can turn it on and off, and you can compare different periods. So let's just say the last 30 days compared to the previous year. It looks like this product wasn't selling last year. Here, last 7 days compared to the previous 7 days, up by 15%. So you can add that into the math if you like. Then you have sales spikes. So this tool will find any times where your sales spike to 150% of your average sales for that period. So turning it on finds those times, and it basically removes them from the math. Now this has got to be 150% or more. It's not going to be just any old spike. It's got to be a fairly significant spike. An example of this would be just say on a particular product, you had an influencer who promoted it, and so the sales spiked really high. Obviously, that's not something you can predict or control. So you're not necessarily going to want to have that added into the math and your forecasting. So here's where you could have them automatically found and removed. But just say you found, okay, this 12th of July, I mean, obviously that was Prime Day, but let's just say it wasn't, and you're like, no, that was organic. You could also include it into the forecast again, if you have some reason to. So you have some control and flexibility there. Then we have deep discounts. So this is similar in that when you turn it on, it'll find any times where you had 30% or more off. So that would include your like coupons. And again, they'll show up here, and you get the option to include them or exclude them from the forecast and all of the math. Then we have this stockouts feature. So this is pretty cool. If I turn it on, it'll turn off all of your stockouts. In other words, remove them from the forecast and from the velocity Obviously, we don't know what you would have sold if you did have inventory on those days and you didn't have any inventory. So we're going to remove them altogether. But when it came to getting our velocities accurate as possible, we really tried to do that. So we found two factors. One was that just say you sell a product that has on average 50 units per day sold, and you're down to about 6 units left at Amazon, and we're only removing those stock out days only. So you have this day of only 6 units sold. Monday, you sold the regular 50, Tuesday, you sold 6, and then the Wednesday, you're out of stock. If we don't exclude that day of 6, it's going to really water down the velocity and affect the accuracy, right? So we came up with this extra tool up here to basically remove those as well. So rather than only removing the stock out days, it'll also find any times where your average daily sales fell below 30%, and it'll remove those too. So occasionally you'll see like some 1s and 2s or different quantities, not only stock out days, and that would be why. And then on the flip side, we also found that when a person's coming back in stock after having a stock out, it's not like your sales immediately go back to what they were. So that was another factor that was affecting the accuracy of velocity. And like I said, we've basically addressed that with this tool. This is customizable, this percentage, but 30% works pretty well. And again, you can save this sort of setting to all products to save you time. Then we have additional sales growth. So here, if you plug in any growth, just say you're growing by 10%, particularly if you have a very lengthy lead time, like if you have a 180-day lead time, and you've been growing, the calculation 180 days earlier could be very off. So if you're definitely growing, you're growing, you could plug that in, it'll add that percentage of growth on top of everything. Then we have future lightning deals. So this would be where you plug in any lightning deals or like your Prime Day that just was, and you plug in how many units you think you're going to sell for that entire period, and it'll divide that in amongst the velocity across those 2 days. You can build out as many as you need to in advance as well. And then we have seasonal spikes. So we have 2 ways of doing seasonality. The first one is manual. So this has been around for a while. Pretty much it's manual. So you would just plug in, let's do some Q4 seasonality. So let's just say leading up to Christmas Day or something, call it December spike, give it a name, and then let's just say the sales spike by 125% throughout that period. So what it does is it takes today's velocity, which right now is 1.99, and it adds 125% on top of that. So that would be an additional 2.49 units, right? So you have the option then to lock this in. This does not lock in the velocity, it only locks in the additional units. So whatever the velocity may be, just say in November, it's now up to 2.5 on average per day. It's going to be the 2.5 on top of that if this is locked. If this is unlocked, it'll basically be whatever that average is, that additional percentage on top of it. You can build out as many as you like. You can have it repeat annually if you want to. And then the cool thing about this is you can also do a negative percentage. So just say in January, after that Q4 spike, you get a little bit of a dip. You can also put in a negative percentage. This is good if you want to just keep it simple and very manual. But then we have this brand new feature, our automated seasonality. This has only been out for maybe about a month. So this is super cool. Basically, first thing I'm going to show you is that, let's see, this is in monthly, and we have this black line here. So this line here represents your annual average, your normal from the previous year. So it sort of replaces last year's sales in that it's using last year's sales. So the first thing you're going to do is work out what this 100% annual average really equals. So you're going to look at your last year's sales and work out how many units that average was. I'm not going to get too much into the math of it, but let's just say, we see here, 109%. So 100% is roughly 40 units, let's just say. So say this is 40 units, and what it's going to do with this seasonal curve, it's going to then, on top of your normal, how much it actually spikes above that normal average and how much it dips below it. So that would obviously be selling a lot less, 90% less than this 100%. So 90% less than the average sales of the previous year. We really like this because it's very intuitive, it's very hands-off, and once you set it up, you can pretty much just let it go. And it's going to use your adjusted velocity in conjunction with the seasonality that you've set in here. So these percentages are actually completely able to be changed. So if I wanted to put it up to 400%, I would just tweak it there. The other cool thing about this is you can change it to different marketplaces. You can also do it in weekly, bi-weekly, quarterly, and then you can actually choose different product seasonality and switch them around. So just say I'm just launching a product and it doesn't have any seasonality. It obviously doesn't have any history. I can actually go and take the seasonality of a similar product and use that seasonality. I can also use 2 different products and average out the seasonality between the 2. And then I can also just say I sell this product in one marketplace, but I'm about to launch it in another. I can also use the seasonality of the product from the other marketplace. So when you have it in weekly view, just to show you, it's customizable on a weekly basis. So like I said, it's very hands-off, and we like that aspect about it. So that's your seasonality. And then once you've done all your settings and put in all the parameters, you basically come over to this inventory timeline, and you'll see each of these columns and the date here in the far right. So this is where you can basically check all of your settings, the math, and make sure that it's going to play out how you wanted it to, and sort of see into the future. So you can do it in weekly view, monthly view. I prefer daily just to be able to see everything that's going on. So right now it's telling us to order 50 units to the warehouse based off this lead time, which ends at this warehouse, right? 50 units. And based on this lead time of 38 days, I can see that it's estimated to arrive on September 2nd. So if I scroll down to September 2nd, following the day on the far right here, I'll see it arriving to the warehouse September 2nd. And then here we've got 100 units in the warehouse currently. It'll tell me which one. That's just a fake name. Isaac Test 3, supposed to be a warehouse. And then it's saying to transfer 20 units. Again, based on this 15-day transfer time, that's expected to arrive August 10. So if I went down to August 10, I'll be able to see here at Amazon FBA inventory column, the FBA inventory arriving. And then here we have the velocity being deducted from the FBA quantity day by day. Now, obviously this one has a little stock out coming up. This is just a fake demo account. Shouldn't be stocking out so much on SoStocked, but you can see it deducts the velocity every day, and then it's leaving based off this buffer stock that's been put in, well, would have been put in. It'll leave that buffer stock there before the next bit arrives. And like I said, you can see that in weekly view and monthly view too. And this can also be exported to an Excel spreadsheet. So you can customize all these dashboards as well if you wanted to have different groups and order in a specific way. Have different filters, like this one, for example, is just transfers that need to be placed in the next 30 days. Then we have up here this Restock Limits tool. It's turned off right now, but essentially it helps you manage your transfers based on your available restock limits, right? So it just means that it's going to prioritize, for example, your best sellers over, or perhaps your highest profiting products to be restocked over others within your limits using that tool. So if you have any restock limits trouble, you can actually turn that on and you can plug it in and utilize that. Next, we have this orders page. So this is our order tracker. Basically, it's sort of based off a Trello board. It has all these different columns, and these cards just move automatically. The cards are essentially either your purchase orders or your work orders, or in the case of this column here, these are your FBA shipments. Like I said, it does an API pull every day, twice a day. So it's going to pull in that data and any FBA shipments that you've created. Once you have a PO put into the system, if you open this up, it's going to follow the lead time, and it's going to basically follow that lead time within these different columns. So this card will automatically sit in production for however many days. If it's in ocean freight for 20 days, then it'll sit in en route for 20 days, and so on when it's checking into the warehouse, and then when it's checking into Amazon. And on that API pull, it'll also tell you how many units have checked in thus far. So that happens automatically, but you do have the option, like this one here with the padlock, to lock it in place and do it manually if you want to. And you can manually receive your inventory like this, say how many you've received, how many were damaged, if any, and how many missing, and any notes. Obviously, it's not always the case that it's going to follow the lead time exactly. So if you have any shipment delays, you can just click on this, and you have 2 options of how you want to add the delay in. So you can go days delayed by, add in the quantity of days, if it's 7, and which part of the lead time process it's been delayed at. And this lead time will basically update, or you can just select a new ETA date and plug that in. Same thing, it'll update there. Then you can see here, you've got all these different tabs with like all your POs, all your work orders, they would be your transfers, all your FBA shipments. So here's where you'd see everything, even things that are in working status, and then customer orders. If you do any FBM, you can actually deduct your FBM orders here. I don't think there are any in this account. Just use this as an example. But so you've got your warehouse inventory plugged in, your third-party warehouse inventory, and you've got this order come in and sent out. You can just go here, deduct warehouse inventory, and it'll update your warehouse inventory levels. And yeah, that's about it. Does anyone have any questions? Probably raise your hand if you do, and I'll unmute you. Anyone? All right. Oh, yes. Go ahead, Sophia.
Yeah, how would you prepare the system prior to Prime Day or like Cyber Week, for example? Is there a way to do that? I know like typically we always try to send in a lot of inventory ahead of time because inventory takes a lot to check in because everybody's sending their stuff in. So is there a way around that or any filters, anything like that?
Yeah, there's a couple things. First thing I would do is for times like that, I would build out a specific lead time so that you can have the correct estimation of time that it's going to take for the check-in part. So often we would also just have people just say this is your regular lead time, copy the lead time, and then just label it Q4 and adjust it accordingly for Q4, for example, or Prime Day or whatever it might be, whatever variable that is. So you'd have that already ready and prepared so that when you're forecasting, you're using that lead time. And then in terms of knowing how much, like what quantity of inventory to order in time for that, a couple of things you can do. You can add it into the seasonality, or you can also add the lightning deal in, like I was showing you before. What it does when you actually put in that quantity, let's just make up a time period, just say you're going to sell an extra 450 units. It divides that velocity across those 3 days. And rather than this 2, whatever the velocity should be, it'll appear here, right? So this is how many it's deducting each day. So once that updates, it reverse engineers everything, and it basically works out how much you need to order at whichever time based on the lead time you're using, so that you have enough inventory there at Amazon for that deal.
And you could also use last year's data as well, I'm guessing.
Yeah, you can for sure.
Got it. Cool. Thank you.
Especially on that automated seasonality, that becomes very easy.
Got it. And then I did have one question. There's like a little warning that you have inventory and double counted. What is that?
Yeah. I actually just turned it off. Sorry, I didn't realize you were going to ask about that. Basically, that's just what you do is you reconcile your FBA shipments against the relevant, like the corresponding orders. And it just warns you to make sure you've done that before you do your ordering. For example, if it sees that you have a purchase order for like, I don't know, 5 red apples and an FBA shipment for 5 red apples, it not being AI, like just being a computer, doesn't know if these are the same 5 apples or if these are actually 10 different apples. So it just asks you to match them up, connect the dots so that it knows.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Cool. Alex, do you have any questions for me?
No, I'm good.
All right, cool. All righty. Well, thanks for coming, guys. Sophia, I'm going to put a link in the chat for you to sign up. If you would like, there's a 30-day free trial. It's pretty good. Helps you get set up, and then you can see if it's going to work for you. I do all of the onboarding calls personally, so I also will do like one-on-one Zoom calls to help you with your setup.
Excellent. Thank you, Tamara.
No worries. Thanks for coming, guys. Oh, sorry. Clayton has a question. Sorry, Clayton. I didn't see you there. Go ahead.
No worries. I had to drop out for like 4 minutes. I had like a call and then I jumped back in. But whenever you were doing the transfers and also creating the orders, like when you create a purchase order, can you do that within SoStocked? I might have missed that.
Yeah, I didn't go into detail, but yeah, if you, for example, hit this order all button and create this order, so I'm just going to call this like test 1, 2, 3, right? It basically adds all of the different orders, the quantity that it was suggesting. You can change that if need be. But yeah, if I just fast forward to the end.
And can you put in like your box dimensions and pallets and all that stuff in here?
You can.
Okay.
If I fast forward to the end, you'll see that you have 3 options. You can download as a PDF, you can email it directly to the customer, or you can download as a flat file.
That's
Not
incredible.
to the customer, sorry, I meant the supplier. My bad.
Okay. I missed some of it, so I'm going to jump on the Thursday demo as well, but I really appreciate you.
Yeah, no problem. No worries. Bye.
Bye-bye.